The ground you walk on is not the real ground. Next time you walk through Philadelphia's old city, do one thing: stop your steps and look down. That sidewalk you're standing on, that is not the original ground. The real Philadelphia is 15 feet below you. Those doorways that today lead to basement restaurants, they once opened directly onto the main street. Those staircases you climb to enter an old building, they were not built because the design looked good. They were built because the city rebuilt itself on top of its own ground. And the most astonishing part, the original staircases, the original doorways, the original cobblestone streets, they are all still down there, sealed, preserved, exactly as they were in 1770. But this story is not just about old buildings. This is the story of a city that literally rose up for its own economic survival. And that one decision destroyed property values here, fought battles in courts for decades, and created a legal principle that still affects every major city in America today. In 1682, William Penn founded Philadelphia, and he was genuinely a genius in terms of planning. He had witnessed the Great Fire of London in 1666 with his own eyes. He had seen how cramped, filthy, and disorganized streets could destroy an entire city in a single night. So he did something different. Penn's surveyors laid out a perfect grid along the Delaware River, wide streets running east to west, numbered streets running north to south. Every plot the same dimensions, every street the same width. This was America's first planned city, and at the time, better designed than any city in the world. The first 60 years everything went smoothly. By 1740, Philadelphia's population reached 40,000, larger than Boston, close to New York. Ships from London, the Caribbean, and every major colonial port stood at the Delaware waterfront. Philadelphia was the fastest growing city in colonial America. But Penn's plan had one thing he had not thought about, or perhaps he thought about it but ignored it. He built his streets at exactly the elevation of the Delaware River, level with the river, and whenever it rained, the water had nowhere to go except inside the buildings. In the 1740s, Philadelphia flooded dozens of times a year. This is not a metaphor. Real water mixed with sewage, mixed with animal waste, mixed with raw garbage poured directly into people's homes and shops. In 1747, there was a merchant on Water Street. He had imported 3 months' worth of textiles from London. That shipment had been sitting in his warehouse for 2 weeks. Then a spring storm hit. 4 feet of contaminated river water pushed into his ground floor, and within a matter of hours the entire shipment was worthless. There was no insurance. Property flood insurance simply did not exist in the colonial era. That merchant sold his property at a loss and left for New York. And this was not one man's story. It was happening over and over again. Between 1745 and 1755, Philadelphia lost hundreds of merchants and craftsmen to New York and Boston. New York did not flood as severely. Boston had begun building a seawall and drainage system. Philadelphia's advantages, central location, efficient grid, Delaware waterfront, were all being wiped out every year because of flooding. The city council tried everything. In 1748, drainage ditches were dug 3 feet deep, running alongside the streets. They worked in light rain, they were overwhelmed in heavy storms. And they were dangerous. People fell into them at night. Children drowned in them. In 1751, wooden gutters were installed, logs hollowed out and fitted together. They rotted within 2 years. Property owners were given ordinances to maintain the street in front of their buildings. Some complied, some did not. The result was worse flooding. Because the problem was not maintenance. The problem was elevation. In 1755, city engineer Thomas Hooker put forward a proposal that left everyone laughing and genuinely astonished. He said, "Do not control the water. Raise the city above the water. Pile fill material on top of every street, dirt, gravel, broken brick, layer by layer, until it sits 12 to 15 feet above the Delaware River floods." Property owners immediately opposed it. Critics said it was technically impossible. The cost was prohibitive. But Hooker had done the math. Building a seawall would cost approximately £80,000 and then require maintenance forever. Raising the streets would cost roughly the same, but would be a permanent solution. The seawall created another problem too. It would cut off direct access to the Delaware River, and a city whose entire economy depended on ships and docks simply could not afford that. Work began in 1756. Water Street first. Market Street in 1759. Chestnut Street in 1762. The process moved gradually westward. Workers built temporary wooden retaining walls on both sides of the street. Then cartload after cartload of dirt and gravel was poured in. Horse-drawn wagons brought material from quarries outside the city. Pour it, spread it, compact it, then pour again, until the street was 12 to 15 feet higher. Property owners had two choices. First, match your building's entrance to the new street elevation. Build stairs, rebuild the first floor, redesign the facade. Second, leave your entrance where it was, and watch the street rise around you, while your doorway slowly becomes a basement. Here the economic reality was brutal. What would a typical property owner on Market Street face in 1765? 50 to 200 pounds to build staircases, 20 to 40 pounds per year lost in rental income from sealing the original ground floor, and at least 150 pounds for a full renovation. For a merchant earning 200 pounds a year, all of this was ruinous. Wealthy merchants saw opportunity. They commissioned elaborate stonework and wrought iron railings. Many of those buildings still stand in Old City today. You can recognize them by those ornate staircases rising up from the ground. The middle class added simple wooden stairs and converted their old first floors into storage. The poor did nothing. They let their buildings sink below the rising streets. Property values dropped immediately. They stayed where they were, but slowly disappeared from Philadelphia's economic map. This process took 80 years to complete across the entire central city. Different streets were raised at different times depending on funding and political will. This meant a transitional period that lasted for decades. You would walk along one block at the new elevation, then descend 15 feet to cross an intersection that had not yet been raised, then climb back up on the other side. In a letter from 1768, a Philadelphia merchant writes that to get from his home to his warehouse, he must ascend 2 staircases, cross one original level street, then go down again to reach his warehouse door. A journey that previously took 5 minutes now took 15. And it was not just about time. In 1771, a city ordinance came. Property owners were required to install railings at the junctions of raised and unraised streets because in just 1 month 3 pedestrians had fallen from those edges and died. This is the part that is most overlooked. Before the street raising, waterfront property was the most valuable land in Philadelphia. A warehouse on Water Street with direct dock access could charge triple the rent of an inland warehouse on 2nd Street. Being close to the river meant money. After the street raising, everything reversed. Waterfront buildings were now significantly below the new street level, in some places 20 feet below. Moving heavy goods up and down, double handling in work that was previously direct. Carts used to drive straight into the warehouse. Now, unload the goods at street level, carry them down the stairs or ramp, get them to the warehouse door. Every single transaction now required twice the labor. Samuel Morris, a shipping merchant, owned 3 warehouses on Water Street in 1755, collectively worth approximately £3,000. By 1780, after the street raising, those same properties were worth less than £1,000. The buildings had not changed. Only the elevation had changed. Only this had changed. Customers now had to descend 2 flights of stairs to reach him, while his competitor on 2nd Street offered street-level convenience. Morris died in 1782, having lost most of his fortune. On the other side was Daniel Rhodes. In 1758, he sold his Front Street property and bought 2 properties on 3rd Street. His friends said he had gone mad. 10 years later, Rhodes' 3rd Street properties had tripled in value. That Front Street property he had sold had lost half its value. By 1790, Rhodes was among Philadelphia's wealthiest merchants. His success was not because of better business practices. He had simply understood that elevation would determine value. The city gave nobody anything. If your property was left 15 feet below street level and lost half its value, that was your problem. The city's position was simple. We raise the streets to prevent flooding, and that benefits everyone. How individual property owners adapt is up to them. This was a legal chaos that lasted for decades. The most significant case was Commonwealth versus Morris, 1773, where waterfront merchants argued that the city had effectively destroyed the value of their properties and they deserved compensation. The city argued that flood prevention was a legitimate public purpose from which everyone benefited. The court sided with the city. And from this case, a legal principle emerged that is alive to this day: incidental damage. If a government action serves a legitimate public purpose and property value loss is a side effect of that, compensation is not required. This principle shaped American property law for 2 centuries. When American cities built highways through poor neighborhoods in the 1950s, and property owners received nothing, those developers cited Philadelphia's street-raising cases as precedent. Philadelphia built the legal framework that gave governments broad authority to reshape cities, without bearing the full cost. But those buried first floors did something else. They created an entirely new category of commercial space. These were not typical basements. They were originally first floors, high ceilings, proper flooring, finished walls and windows that now sat at sidewalk level. Natural light came through. The space did not feel cramped. Taverns moved into these spaces because the below-street location stayed cool in summer. Disreputable businesses moved there because the below-street entrance was invisible from the main thoroughfares. In Philadelphia, Quaker values still influenced social norms. Discretion and privacy were valuable. By the 1780s, a 2-tier economy had developed. At street level, banks, law offices, fine goods shops, respectable businesses. Below, inside those same buildings, accessible through staircases, an entirely different world. Taverns, gaming houses, small factories, and various semi-legal enterprises. A property owner could rent the same building twice at higher rates to respectable tenants at street level, and at lower rates to everyone else below. This system lasted through Prohibition. Philadelphia, one of America's worst flooding-era cities, saw its buried floors become legendary for speakeasies. In a 1926 raid on an accounting firm on 2nd Street, nothing was found at street level, but agents noticed excessive foot traffic. A concealed staircase was found leading down to a speakeasy accommodating over 100 patrons. It had been operating for 3 years without detection. The Philadelphia Police Department eventually created a specialized unit just for buried floor violations. But with thousands of buildings, comprehensive enforcement was practically impossible. In the 1970s, when excavation began for a subway line in Philadelphia, workers found a perfectly preserved entire colonial-era block 15 feet below a printer's shop with shelving intact. A tavern with bottles still on the bar. A dry goods store with merchandise still on display. Newspapers from 1772 were still legible. Leather goods that had mummified in the sealed, dry environment. Glass bottles with liquid still inside. The printer's typesets arranged on tables as if the printer had just walked away. He probably had. The cost of moving everything to a new location was greater than the value of the equipment. In 2015, while repairing water mains under Market Street, workers found a complete cobblestone street 20 feet below the modern surface original, laid in the 1680s, buried by the street raising in the 1760s, and perfectly preserved for 250 years. This is what Philadelphia's archaeologists love most. Other cities crumble and build on the rubble. Philadelphia buried its history intact, a complete snapshot, frozen at a specific moment in time. Today, some property owners have excavated those buried first floors and converted them into restaurants and private event spaces. In 2008, a building owner on 2nd Street dug into his basement and discovered it was actually an original 1740s first-floor original fireplaces, exposed beam ceilings, and window openings that once faced the street, now facing a wine cellar. He spent $200,000 on restoration. Today, that restaurant operates 15 feet below the modern street level and has become a tourist attraction. That basement restaurant where you went for dinner, where the ceilings were unusually high and the windows sat at sidewalk level, that was someone's living room in 1740. That doorway accessible down a staircase, that was the main entrance when this city still stood on its original ground. Philadelphia did not just raise its streets. It buried an entire economic system, built a legal framework, and defined the relationship between property and public benefit in a way that lives on in American law to this day. When a government today runs a highway through a neighborhood and property owners receive nothing, that is the next chapter of the story of those Philadelphia merchants who went to court in 1773 and lost. When a city decides that public benefit is greater than individual loss, that is the same calculation Philadelphia made in 1755. And that original Philadelphia, those first floors, those doorways, those cobblestone streets, it is all still there, under every building, in the darkness, sealed, waiting. Philadelphia did not say the past matters more than the future. It simply decided that to make way for the future, the past would have to be buried. And then, it literally did exactly that.